Welcome everyone in this new video tutorial about Diablo-like dungeon generator. In this video we're going to make our dungeon multiplayer. So first thing I want to do is actually to play the game with several players, and I already know what's going to happen. I never actually ran the generator with several players, but I think what's going to happen is that each player is going to have a different dungeon. So I actually want two players, and if I'm hitting play, I think they're both going to have different setups. So like that, we can clearly see they have different setups. And we also see we cannot, so excuse me, I brought that on my different screen. So he has a different setup than the server. We can clearly see in the miniature, in the thumbnail. So, and we also can see the client cannot move, and that's because the character blueprint they are using is using the node simple move to. Okay, that's in the controller. So if I'm opening up the controller, they are using the node simple move to location, and this does not work in a multiplayer environment. So we cannot use that. But for the purpose of this tutorial, making the other player move is not in the scope of this tutorial, so we're not going to take care of this. We're just going to take care of the fact that the two players got the same. We're going to make sure the two players have the same dungeon layout. So there are several ways to do that. So we can actually just make every tile replicated. So this is costing a lot of bandwidth because every tile costs money. We can multicast the list of tiles to create, but in that case, any players connecting after the multicast won't have the dungeon layout, so it's not the proper way. We want to actually store the state of the dungeon, and we can actually share the random seed, and that's actually quite a good. So this is actually about telling all the players what is the random, what the random should pick when he has a choice to make. For instance, when we check for a step back chance, this thing, we can share a random seed that makes sure every machine find out the same number, return the same number. But I actually don't know how to set up this properly. Sorry about that. And the solution I want to implement is to rep notify a variable that is going to take care of the that is going to store the list of the tiles it needs to spawn and broadcast that to all the clients. So for that, we'll need to create a structure, because I cannot, for instance, I cannot broadcast a map, because map are not supported, replication map is not supported. So we'll need a new structure that is going to be S tile. We're going to open that up, and we're going to make that a vector 2D and a BP tile like that, and we're going to name that location and class. We're going to hit save, and before we implement any logic, I want to show you what replication does. If I'm going to our BP tile function, I mean BP tile blueprint, if I'm going to our class default and I'm saying this is replicated, if I'm hitting compile, hitting save, I wanted to hit play, but first we need to make sure only the server calculates anything. So for that, we're going to go to our generate level function, and we're going to add and switch as authority node. We're going to hit compile, hit save, hit play, and as you can see, the server and the client, so the server has had the same layout than the client, but after a certain amount of time, it actually disappeared. So why does it disappear and reappear? And why is it not rotated? So, and then it's reappearing. So the disappearing and reappearing, it's about Unreal Logic that automatically hides actors that are far away from our camera, and they are forgotten from the network. It comes from the net curl distance square, and it makes it so it actually stores the information to hide the actors in order to save bandwidth. So that's why it's not. That's why they are disappearing. Why is it not rotated? Well, that's because the level generator is not a replicated actor, and we are rotating it. But the rotation, we are rotating when we end the generation of the dungeon, and this replication is not rotated. And the third thing we add, the third weird thing we can see is that we do not have the tiles being orange at the end of the level on client. And that's because when we create a tile, we pass the information regarding the tile type as a variable, and this variable is not replicated. Therefore, and the color of the tile depends on the tile type, and therefore the client doesn't have the proper information regarding the tile type. But so that's just hitting the replication mark, the checkbox, make it so the client can see the level, actually has the same level than the server, but it's actually costing a lot of bandwidth. And if you just want the easy way, you can say it's replicated and the net update frequency is actually 1. So it only updates tiles once a second instead of 100 times a second. So it costs less bandwidth. And what happens if the server regenerate the dungeon? It's actually not being regenerated for the client, and I'm not sure why it's not. I'm not sure if it's not replicated or if the client, yep, I think the client is just falling. It just failed because we're not teleporting. When we actually generate the level, when we end generation, we are teleporting only player character 1, and we actually want to teleport all players. So we're going to get the game mode. We're going to grab the players. How can we do that? Get num players. We're going to loop through that. We're going to loop how many times? From 0 to the number of players minus 1. And for each player, we're going to say that we get the player character and we teleport them. And if I hit play, the client should always be teleported, and it should always spawn the layout when the server respawn the layout, except that time. Oh, it's not that it did not spawn. It's just about, yep. So the client is constantly falling, but the server we can clearly see on the server the client is right there. I cannot get rid of the. Okay, I can get rid of the debug menu. So the client is lost, but the server knows the client is there. So if I'm regenerating the dungeon, it fixes the error bug, the client bug, and we can see they have the same layout. And it works everywhere by just checking tiles are replicated. But I actually don't want to check that. I want to say that instead of spawning the tiles, the server is going to store what tiles it is supposed to spawn at what location. So we are going to go to our spawn tile function, actually not that one. We're going to go to our generate layout function on end generation function, spawn tile layout. Instead of calling that, we're going to call store tile layout. And then, so we're going to store that in a replicated variable, and everyone is going to get the replicated variable, and it's going to spawn the right tile depending on the broadcasted variable. So instead of spawning the tile layout, we want to store the tile layout. And I still want to check the spawn tile layout function to see what it does. It loops through that. What are we going to need to store? Only the... So I want to copy paste that in our store tile layout function. But instead of spawning the tile, what I want to do is I actually want to create a temporary array that stores every tile that needs to be spawned and at what location. So we want that and the location. So we want to create a temporary variable of type style, the structure we just created. We want that to be an array. We want that to be called temp tiles. And whenever we were actually adding a tile, we now want to add an entry to that array of the type of tile we found and at the location we are currently looping through. We want to get rid of that spawn tile stuff, and maybe we want to store the tile type. Maybe we'll need to store the tile type. Currently, the tile type only used is to change the color of the tiles, and it's actually not something we want to broadcast because it's not how to say that, it's not gameplay related, and we don't want to overload that structure with informations about non-gameplay stuff, because we're going to replicate that, and the heavier it is, the longer replication time we'll get, and the more bandwidth we'll use, and we want to be as efficient as possible. So only the server will be able to check the amount of steps to start, the type of the class and stuff like that. I mean the type of the tile type and stuff like that. So for each tile we were previously creating, we are now adding something to that array. Once we are done, what do we want to do? We want to grab the array. We want to promote the array to a variable, which is going to be broadcasted tiles. And we want that variable to be rep notify. And what is this going to do? Whenever the server is going to modify that variable, all the clients are going to run that function with the proper values fed in the broadcasted tiles variable. So what happens on end generation? We are generating the error report only on server. Then we store the tile layout, and we'll see for the rest afterwards. So we store the tile layout. For each tile we were supposed to create, we say now we store them. And everyone can loop through the tile which we are supposed to spawn. And then we can spawn a tile. What tile is this? This tile is of that class. And what is the transform? We can just get the transform like that. So it needs get tile transform, paper tile. Okay, I thought this was our function. So I think we just have a function that does this, getting a location and transforming it like this. Get tile location. We want to loop through that and create a tile. The type of that tile and the steps to start, we are not going to feed them if we are not the server. So let's say branch. I mean, we just want to check the authority here. So if you don't have the authority, you just want to spawn the tiles. And if you do have the authority, you don't want to spawn the tiles. You actually want to grab the information we stored in our tile layout map. We want to find the location we are looping through. We want to break the informations. We want to plug the steps to start and the tile type, and then we just want to plug the class like that and the transform like this. So only the server will get the information the tile layout contains. We want to hit compile, hit save. But before actually generating the tiles, what do we want to do? We actually want to reset the level. So we want to destroy the tiles, clear the rerolls and the error log. So we want to reset the level. Where are we running this? So the server is running this when it generates the level. And now we will do this when it actually so we are going to run this right before we generate the layout. So reset level. So it's deleting the tiles. We're just going to make sure we don't loop through an empty array. So if there are tiles to remove, we are going to remove them. If not, we're just going to clear the array and reset the rerolls and stuff like this. We want to delete that. We want to hit play. So the client. So it's not spawning on the client. Why is it not spawning on the client? We're going to check why. So broadcasted tiles, store tile layout. We are doing this, we are storing that, stem tiles, and we are setting this. So this should trigger on the client. The client reset the level, then it creates a tile at that location. So we're going to print in here. We're going to hit play. So only the server prints it. So I actually not sure why. This should be rep notify, replication conditions none. So that might be because, so am I even calling that function? I know I am. We are storing this. Everything else is triggering. But this seems not to be working. What I want to do is to check if the server, of course the server is triggering that, but why is the rep notify function not working? I'm not sure. Oh, of course, I know why. So we want the level generator to be a replicated actor. That's kind of obvious, but in the class defaults, we want the level generate, instead of having each tile replicated, we have only the level generator replicated, which stores a lot of it's less bandwidth expensive. So this is a replicated actor. It's always relevant. We don't want that actor to go dormant anytime. Dormant is the states, the tiles which were disappearing when we were increasing the range of our camera. Some tiles were disappearing. They were actually going dormant, and checking always relevant, make sure that actor cannot go dormant. Net update frequency, we actually only want that actor to be replicated once per second. Minimum net update frequency 1, net priority 1, and we want to hit compile, hit save, hit play, and the client is going to have the layout properly replicated. If I'm spawning more dungeon, so if I'm spamming the spawning function, you can see on the client it's only being updated once per second. That's the last metric I changed, the net update frequency. But you actually never reset your dungeon as fast, so you don't care much about the 1 second, the 1 time per second. So the client has the proper layout, and we are using something that is quite bandwidth efficient, I believe. We want that to be in our references folder. So this is quite an efficient way of replicating it, I believe. And if someone disconnects and reconnects, is going to have the layouts being spawned as well, because this is going to trigger. Broadcasted tiles is going to trigger. And I want to start the game as in standalone, just to make sure the server is actually spawning the dungeon in standalone, because sometimes you get errors where the server is not triggering the... Okay, it's working. Sometimes the server does not trigger the unrep broadcasted tile function when the variables get changed. And sometimes you have to actually call the function yourself, and I actually cannot call that. Why cannot I? Can't I? So okay, so they apparently fixed the bug in 4.17, because if I cannot call the function, it means it always calls the function automatically on server. So they fixed the bug. So this is going to wrap this video. To wrap up this video, we have a dungeon generator, which is we're going to fix the rotation bug first. So I think that's quite easy to do. If I'm not mistaken, we just have to say that whenever we... Oh, I think that's even easier than I expected. If I go to our on end generation function, we are actually setting the actor rotation here. We don't want to do that here. We actually just want to say that in event begin play, we want to set the actor rotation before we generate the level. And this is to make sure this is the Diablo-like camera setting. This is making sure our dungeon is rotated. You might don't even want that. If I'm hitting play, it's working on both client and server. So if I'm regenerating the dungeon, it's working. So this is going to wrap up the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.